What's up, everybody? This is Noa Dalzell, and I'm here with another episode of You Got Boston. Back in my room, I took an overnight bus from Madison Square Garden last night, back to Boston, and just woke up a few hours ago and finished my post game stories and everything. And I'm happy to chat here with all of you. Obviously, this is a little bit of a different type of show than I normally do. I usually like to draw the positives, and I still will. I still think that it's always good to keep a level head in difficult moments. But obviously, I think things last night went in a direction that's every Celtics fan's nightmare. Went in a direction that everybody can only hope and pray is not kind of what it looks like right now. And it's very possible that during the show we'll get an update. I think around this time. Um, is when usually the day after Shams will kind of release his report. But I was in the arena yesterday. I was in the locker room after the game, kind of looking at the body language of the people who are the closest to Tatum, his mom, his best friends, who are Emil Jefferson, one of the assistant coaches on the team, and Nick Sang, his trainer, and Brett Hampton, who's the team photographer. Like, he has this group of guys that are very close to him. They were all in the locker room. You could just feel that this was just a really dark night. And I know people can clown that, like, nobody died, right? This is just basketball. It's just injuries. It's a part of the sport. But in the scheme of things, when you romanticize the highs and you romanticize the championship and you romanticize all the best moments, I think that there's a certain level of devastation that's fair to kind of talk through here as well. And so feel free to put questions in the chat. I'll get through all of the questions. I have time today. I think it's important to kind of debrief this moment. Obviously, Celtics go down 3-1 in the series, which people, very few people predicted. I think on both sides, everybody expected the Celtics to win, or at least for this to go long. And at the same time, the loss felt immediately like this. It didn't even seem to matter anymore. The fear is an Achilles tear. I think everybody has seen that. If you're here, you probably already know that. So that's the fear. The injury itself, you normally with an Achilles tear, you see this kind of like the thing that the Achilles actually kind of like snaps up your calf, and you can see that, and you can see a video of that. I think they just don't have the angle of it. So the fact that there's no video doesn't mean that it's not an Achilles tear. But it's hard for me to know. Obviously, all the Twitter doctors, they're all saying that it's an Achilles tear. Joe Mazzulla yesterday was pretty brief. He just said, it's a lower leg injury, that he's getting an MRI Tuesday morning. There's no practice for the Celtics today. They're not doing the Zoom availability or anything like that. We did talk to a bunch of players after the game: Kristaps Porzingis, Jayson Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Derek White. It was a very dark scene in the locker room. I've been covering some people think you can kind of see the pop. Yeah, I didn't see the pop, but again, also it's just weird that there's not a better video. But in any case, I'll just say, I think, what you saw in the post-game locker room was a couple things. One, you saw a team of, guys who have been by Tatum's side as a friend, just really somber. Like, Sam Hauser's reaction really kind of stuck with me. He was just sitting there kind of looking forward. And obviously Sam hasn't been a part of the series. He's been frustrated with, he's had a year filled with injuries that suddenly feel a lot less consequential, right? Considering kind of what we're potentially talking about here. But I've never been in the locker room when it's been that quiet after tough losses, just everybody just looking down at themselves, holding their faces, looking out into the kind of the wall. And a lot of guys got out of there really quick, but the ones that didn't just like kind of weren't able to move. Jaylen Brown just kind of sat there in his towel for a while, like just kind of like pondering things. I thought the Jaylen Brown that we saw at the podium was the most like out of, speechless version of him that we've seen. He's always has these kind of one-liners. Part of the things that we really like about talking to Jaylen is that he always has these fun quotes that are, make our lives easier as reporters. But yesterday he was just like, I'm at a loss. Like, I don't even know what to say. I think that's how everybody felt. Al Horford was the one that got me the most, because obviously Al is like a mentor, like a father, they have this kind of beautiful relationship. Tatum has said many times that Al Horford is his favorite teammate ever. And Al basically was like, the game is the game, but my concern is right now with Jayson. And I think that's how everybody felt. on the team. Like, there was a game to discuss. I'm honestly not going to talk about it too much. We can talk about it if people have questions. I'm happy to. But like, the game was just a terrible defensive game. I thought they kind of got by with shot making, and Tatum's brilliance really kept them in it. And they really had no business winning that one, considering like, did they do the little things? They didn't. So the game's the game, and they weren't going to win this game regardless. They were already down by 9 with 3 minutes to go, and the Knicks have just put together a really incredible series here. But I think within seconds, like as soon as he was carried off, which is the first time that I've ever seen him react like that. You know, he has ankle sprains all the time and little things, but you could tell right away this was a completely different thing. And the thing that got me the most was seeing his training staff and seeing Nick's face. And like, I was looking at Nick's face because I couldn't see Tatum's face because he was crouched over, but looking at Nick's face, I was like, oh shoot, like this is not like an ankle sprain. Like this is something a lot worse. So yeah, it's just, that was kind of the feeling in this room. Derek White said, we love him. Nobody talked to him afterwards. I think he was surrounded by people, his kind of inner circle. The fact that, people like, Emil is on the coaching staff. I mentioned his teammate at Duke, his mom. He has this group of people that are really, really close to him in the organization that aren't even just the players. So the players that we spoke to did not get a chance to talk to him, but you could tell it felt pretty hopeless, right? And I don't want to speak out of turn. Like, we don't have an official injury yet. We don't know exactly what this is going to be. It's hard to gauge. But I can say, like, right now it feels pretty likely that it's an Achilles rupture. I think the hope maybe is that it's a partial rupture, or that something is not what it seems. And if that's the case, I think you start to think beyond this series, beyond this year, and kind of in the grander scheme of his career and of the sport and of this franchise. And we'll have a million opportunities to talk about this offseason and the moves that they're going to make. And this was already going to be an offseason of moves. They were already going to trade some players. I think there was a lot of reports about that before the playoffs, in the middle of the playoffs. This doesn't really change anything. But, there's a question now of like, how are they going to approach potentially a season without Jayson Tatum? Because obviously everything has been built around him. He's been their best scorer, their best rebounder, their best playmaker, one of their best defenders. Like, it's a completely different team without him. And so now you think to yourself, like, is this going to be like the Warriors in 2020 after they kind of blew everything up with all the injuries and Durant and Klay Thompson going down in the finals? Like, I had that feeling a little bit watching him getting carried off, of like, you were on the brink of, people thought you were on the brink of repeating or being a part of a dynasty and all that. They really weren't, because the series had already been kind of out of hand regardless. So this is not the reason why they are not going to win a championship. But yeah, I think you could feel that there was like this kind of like historic moment. And I got to say, shout out to, I know there's fans aren't a monolith, but shout out to the many Knicks fans that I saw kind of processing this on a very human level. It really reminded me of how I was feeling. Like, to me, it's like, I'm just seeing somebody like suffer like that, seeing the emotions around it. Like, you could tell it was hitting the Knicks fans too, even though obviously they were very happy to take out 3-1 lead going into the Eastern Conference Finals. So just being in the building, like all the fans that I saw and chatted with, they were like, have you heard anything? This is devastating. Like, this is not the way we wanted this to go down. Like, that's what I was hearing. And so, obviously saw the celebrations and all of that. And as they should, it's an awesome series for them, an awesome win. And they're in really good position. I think that'll be, assuming that they advance there, it'll be a great Eastern Conference Finals. But I think there was a level of humanity that everybody kind of overcame everybody. Jalen Brunson, the first question that he was asked yesterday, he interrupted and kind of put his prayers out to Jalen Brunson. You could see the Knicks players, Karl-Anthony Towns, OG Anunoby standing behind him right after it happened, just kind of like sending him, their love and all of that. So emotional game, and the emotional scene in the locker room. And I did one of these shows last year, the day after the Celtics won the championship. And I was sitting here in my room and didn't really have a plan. I went live at like 2:00, kind of like today, and just kind of unloaded everything that I was feeling. And that night, that was fresh off of Jalen winning finals MVP and coming back in the middle of the night at 6 a.m. with his finals MVP trophy and the confetti, and all of us, we were playing basketball like at TD Garden. And it was my first year ever covering the Celtics. So for me, it was like, that's all I knew, of just kind of how a season can end. And so now this is the other side of that, right? And this is what makes the beautiful moment so special. I think at the same time, like, if it was always easy, it wouldn't mean so much, right? The part of why 2024 meant so much was because of all the times they came up short, all the Eastern Conference Finals where they didn't make it. And at the same time now, you see the other side of that, all the things that have to go right. Like, this could have happened last year. They don't win a championship, right? This could have happened at any point. Like, things went wrong last year, but for the most part, people were healthy and they were able to overcome, Porzingis being out. But right now, I think you're seeing that we're not able to overcome. They're not going to be able to overcome all the things that have gone wrong this postseason. Between Kristaps Porzingis' illness, which I think has taken a massive toll on his team, and he basically hasn't been a factor in this postseason offensively, and I think he's really struggled on both ends. I don't know why he's been playing so much. He said he felt better yesterday after the game. That's what he told us. And I asked him about kind of like, has he been able to identify any patterns? He doesn't even know why he's feeling bad certain days under, he's sleeping all day. On a human level, it sounds really scary, kind of what he's dealing with. But he has been a shell of himself in the series. So that's Kristaps. Obviously, Tatum really struggled offensively through the first 3 games. When he finally gets it together, then this happens. And Jalen's just really had a tough series offensively. And I don't know how much of it is the fact that clearly he doesn't have the explosion that he normally has. He says that he's doing well. He told us before the series, I'm basically 100%, but it's pretty obvious that he's not, in my opinion. Like there were so many moments in the series where normally he would have dunked and he just straight up just laid it in. And so, yeah, I think that it was a little bit too much to overcome. It was, the health of a bunch of key players. Drew Holiday obviously dealing with the hamstring, but came back in time for that. So some of the stuff is like, you don't know how much it's impacting players because they never, in the playoffs, you're never going to say like, I'm really struggling. I'm in so much pain because it's just so, now the opposing team's going to know to come attack you for that, right? Like we saw that in the first round with the Warriors against the Rockets, right? Steph Curry with a thumb injury and Dylan Brooks hitting his thumb over and over again. So they're never going to give us that weakness. But I think this group was more banged up than we really realized. And then ultimately they ran up against a Knicks team that is really good. Like they really are. I think there's a reason why a lot of people in the offseason thought this team was going to be a major threat in the East. And now you're seeing all that come together. It didn't necessarily come together during the season. It didn't come together against the Celtics during the season. But Mikal Bridges has been incredible defensively in the series. OG Anunoby just had awesome moments. So I think as a group, you're seeing like the vision for this Knicks team come together. Jalen Brunson's obviously awesome. We'll see. I know some people think that he's great. Some people think they're great. Some people think that they're not great. We'll see how this run goes. Maybe they get killed by the Pacers in the next round. Maybe they win the championship. We don't know. It's been a very unpredictable postseason. That's what makes basketball great. If you could just guess, if you could predict accurately at the beginning of the playoffs that the 1 seeds are going to advance and they're going to face each other, then like that would be so boring, right? So that's what makes basketball fun. We really don't know what's going to happen. I thought the Cavs and the Celtics were going to play each other in the conference finals because that's what the regular season pointed to. But ultimately, I think a lot of people feel like this is a massive upset, and it is. Like, I think the Celtics were obviously very heavily favored. And again, you're right. I'm talking like the series ended. The series has not ended. But at the same time, I think this is actually not like one of the craziest upsets ever. Like, this is a Celtics team that won, was the number 2 seed and the Knicks were the number 3 seed. Like, this was a 2-3 matchup ultimately. And there were other factors that I think made people really believe in the Celtics, the fact that they're the defending champs, all of that. So, it was, as the series was progressing, I was like, in a certain way, like we probably shouldn't have had that, the Knicks shouldn't have been counted out as much as they were. Even Knicks fans, like we were interviewing Knicks fans the day before the game started. And Knicks fans were like, we just want this to go 6. We just want this to go 7. And like, I don't think, I mean, maybe there were Knicks fans out there that thought they were going to win in 5 or in 6, but very few people that I came across had that prediction. So it makes, basketball's unpredictable. I don't know how much of it was the health. I don't know how much of it was the late game collapses, just kind of taking a toll on this team, back-to-back collapses here. And I thought as soon as they dropped game 2, it was going to be really, really hard to overcome because ultimately, like 2 games like that you led by 20, it's never happened before, that you lose 2 games in a row after leading by 20 in the playoffs. Excuse me. And so, I think nobody really, to being down 2-0, like the odds it was still even odds, like the betting odds were still pretty even, but I thought that it was going to be a massive, it was going to take a ton of resilience from this group. And game 3 was awesome, but they didn't have it in game 4. And again, even if Tatum was not injured, like that's the part of this that everybody watches this game knows, like that's not why they lost this game. But it suddenly becomes not so important, right, what the final outcome was. So there's a lot of things to talk about here. If you want to watch the full press conferences, you can do so on CLNS Media, where you can watch Jaylen Brown's remarks, Derek White, Kristaps Porzingis, Al Horford. You can kind of catch everything that was said, and just you can see the emotions for yourself. We always have everything on CLNS Media. My podcast, You Got Boston podcast, you can subscribe to that as well. So there's a lot of places we can kind of go from here, and we can talk about. There's the game, there's Tatum's prognosis. I'll just say, if I had to guess right now, it looks like an Achilles tear to me. But again, I'm just checking my phone and seeing if there's any updates. And I think we don't have anything right now. I don't think that really means anything. The Celtics are a very buttoned up organization. So a lot of people are saying, like, where's Shams? Where's Shams? If they have no report for him, there's no report. He did an MRI this morning. Even if right now it seems like even if right now it seems like it's almost definite, they're not going to release a report until it's official. So that's probably part of what's taking some time. So let me get through some of the questions. Feel free to put them in the chat. I'm trying to see the questions, but there's all the comments too. So I want to make sure I'm not missing any of the questions. So if you already asked the question and you want to answer it, feel free to put it in again so I can answer it. But I saw the Ringer story that this is the end of the Celtics as we know them. What are your thoughts on the big picture? So let me talk a little bit about this. This is assuming that Tatum's out for next year. If it ends up being that there's by some miracle, this is not, he's fine, or he's not out for the season, or he's not out for next year, or it's a partial tear or something like that, then obviously that would be different. But if the worst is true and Tatum misses next season, this is the end of the Celtics as we know them. And that doesn't mean this team is never going to be competitive again with this core. It doesn't mean that Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum won't be teammates again. There's a lot of different directions that a rebuild could go, or not even a rebuild, but this offseason could go. But this was probably going to be the end of the Celtics as we knew them anyways. We already know that they were not going to be a second apron team for many more years. We already know that, one of their big pieces at least was going to be traded, whether that was Kristaps Porzingis or Drew Holiday or somebody else. And this, I think, further reinforces that, because you're not going to be a second apron team when your star player is out for the season. And if they don't think they can be competitive without him, or at least a championship contender, I think they'll still be competitive. But right now, if you take him off this roster, is this a championship contender? Probably not. And it's hard to even conceptualize, because he's so integral to everything they do that other guys would step up. Different people would do different things that, you'd be seeing, what does Jaylen Brown as the number one option really look like? Can somebody like Pritchard take the leap of actually becoming an all-star like I've been stressing for so long? There's a lot of questions of how this could play out. Just, is there a guy on the bench that suddenly becomes a major rotational contributor? Maybe Baylor Shyman plays. You don't know. And we'll see a piece of that in Game 5, but one game's not enough to show us what this team would be without him. But the reality is that they're not going to get the chance to show the world what this exact team without Tatum looks like, because they're going to get rid of some players to, reduce their payroll. And there's different directions that it could go. They might want to be less competitive for a year and get some good draft picks. I don't see that happening with the Celtics team. I think they're going to try to stay as competitive as possible. So it's a question of who's going to take on big contracts. Are guys like, Sam Hauser, Al Horford is a free agent. Luke Cornett is a free agent. Al Horford, just a couple of days ago, Brian Windhorst of ESPN reported that he is not going to retire this offseason. I spoke to his mom a few months ago. She was very adamant that he's not retiring, that he has a lot of basketball left to be played. And everybody knows he wants to go back to Boston. But does that change if they're not contending for a championship? I don't know. Al is the guy you want on a championship team, right? That's what he's contending for at this point. He's 38, 39 years old. So my thoughts on the big picture is that there's going to be a lot of major changes. In my opinion, they should keep the players that are younger, that long-term can kind of reunite and work together. I would not trade Jaylen Brown at this point. I know fans are frustrated at him because he had a really rough game and a pretty rough series, but I would not trade him. I think there are very few players in the league that can do what he can do. I also think that next year, if you want to be competitive, you have a proven all-star player that can help you stay there. But it's inevitable that some other guys are gonna go, and anything can happen. Again, I don't know, anything can happen. These off-seasons are incredibly hard to predict. I think sometimes you go back and, Marcus Smart, I remember 23 saying we're going to come back next year and be better from this. And a month later he gets traded, right? So anything can happen. But I think this is the end of this iteration of this team. And I don't know exactly what that looks like. And I don't know exactly what that means, but I don't think that's dramatic to say. If by some miracle this is not an injury that's going to keep him out next season, then we're talking maybe this was a little bit premature. So we'll see. We'll see. Other questions. They do not practice at the Auerbach Center today. That's they sometimes do it in between games, but I'm not surprised. Like, they had to travel home yesterday. And ultimately, like, I do think that, it makes sense to me why there was no additional media availability. Skipping over the rest of the series. Not skipping over the series. I think it's hard as a reporter and somebody kind of watching this all unfold. Like, do they really have a chance to come back from being down 3-1? It was already going to be a very difficult uphill battle for them to come back from that type of deficit. It becomes even more challenging now without their, all-around best player and somebody that's just had a massive, massive load for this team. I think there's a level of they're going to be pretty demoralized right now too, and so that's something that you have to acknowledge. I think there's a level of they have to also respond. And Jaylen Brown said, I trust these guys. Joe Mazzulla said, the guys in the locker room are they're going to respond. This is a competitive group. Porzingis said it, injuries happen. It's a part of the game. And so I do think that you're going to see this team respond. I actually think they're going to win game 5 and just kind of rally around each other, rally for Tatum, feed off of the TD Garden crowd, which I'm sure is going to be a very emotional scene there. But can they win 3 straight? Listen, crazy things happen in sports. I never rule anything out. I never guarantee anything, unlike Charles Barkley. So you know that this is such an unbreakable sport. It would be an incredible turn of events if this group without Jayson Tatum could find a way to win 3 games. It would be an incredible turn because I think the Knicks really have a good control of the series, but it's going to take for them to dig deep and for guys to do something pretty historic and incredible. And it's possible, and it would be amazing. So let's see. I wouldn't bet on it right now, but they do have a ton of talent. And Porzingis said afterwards, even without Tatum, we have a ton of talent. I think that's true. And they're not eliminated, right? And they all know that this might be their last chance together as a group. So that alone might be enough for them to kind of lean in on one another and say, listen, we have one opportunity here to extend our season. Let's put everything into it. And maybe they go from there and they do it again in game 6. And, maybe something crazy here happens. It seems unlikely right now, right? Because I've been watching this team every night. I was very optimistic last year they were going to win the championship because all the signs pointed to it. The signs are not pointing to it right now. But you're right. We shouldn't skip over it. And honestly, the media were prisoners of the moment. The fans, even more so. But the players, they're competitors, right? They said after game 2 when they lost, this is the good spot to be in as a competitor. I believe that that's what they felt. And I think right now they're also seeing probably all the eulogies for the Celtics core and all the articles that have been written. And they're thinking to themselves, we're not out, right? We're still in this. There's 3 teams that are down 3-1, right? The Cavs and the Warriors and the Celtics. And all 3 of those teams are preparing for game 5 and preparing to win. So I do think, I think we'll see what happens here. But I do think the comeback chances are low. So we'll see. Continuing to scroll here. Are they going to tank? I don't think they're going to full-blown tank. That would mean they traded literally everybody. I think the NBA has already shown us that is not the move. All the teams that tanked last year and were out of hand doing so, all of those teams are now, they did not win the lottery. The top team was Dallas, who was competitive for the first half of the season and tried to be competitive all the way through. Number 2 team was the Spurs, who also, Wemby injury and all that. But the intentional go tank, go be terrible because you'll win the number 1 pick. The current lottery system, it goes against that. It disincentivizes that, and as it should. So we're not going to see the Celtics team full-blown tank. You might see them not prioritize next year's team as being the best they could possibly be in term and prioritize the longer term, 4 to 5 year window here. So that's the question. But I would be surprised. Although it would be great because AGA is a massive Celtics fan, and I think it'd be cool to have a homegrown player like that from Brockton. That would be pretty awesome. So we'll see. Here's another thing. I think this is a good point. This isn't a question, but all of the pressure was on the Celtics to win the series. Nobody gave the Knicks a chance. They had no pressure on them. That's a big factor. I think this is absolutely true. You see this all the time with games. The Knicks were, and I'm sure the Knicks believed in themselves. I don't think the Knicks had as little faith as the media and the fans. I think the Knicks had faith in themselves, but they were playing a little bit with house money. There was an expectation for them to proceed here. And the Celtics is like, as soon as they lost game one, everybody was like, what is going on here, right? I do think this team has struggled with that. There's always been so much pressure and so many expectations. Miami series was kind of similar to that. But that expectation has been earned, right? It's been the result of years and years of Eastern Conference Finals appearances and winning seasons and all of that. It wasn't going to be easy. I do think fans, the media, all of us were overconfident. Like I thought this was going to be a very difficult series, honestly, but I did pick Celtics in 5. But I also, because I've seen really, really difficult series that end up in sweeps, like the Indy one, and I just thought they were going to find a way to pull out these games, even though they were going to be grinds. And I think I maybe underestimated just how great New York's been in the clutch. It's probably an oversight on my end, but I think you're right. Like the pressure part of this is huge. And the reality is that like, it's all about expectations. It's all about fighting those expectations. And I think you're seeing right now a Celtics team that is now has no pressure on them. Game 5, there's really no pressure from an external standpoint, right? All the odds are in favor of New York. They're down their best player. They're trailing 3-1. It's kind of like, can you stay alive? Maybe we'll see them play a little bit more free. Games 1 and 2 and game 4 too, and the lead was slipping. They got tight. And it was weird because it's like they won a championship. So you would think that there would be a little bit more of that resilience, but they really did get tight. I don't know what exactly to attribute that to. But yeah, it was very apparent. Okay, I'm continuing to scroll through here. Pritchard, White, and Brown is a great backcourt next year. I do think people will realize that if they do keep those 3 guys and other good role players, like this will still be a competitive team. This will still be a playoff team. The question is, will this be a championship contender? That's where you have to kind of put the pieces together. These are 3 players that I have a ton of respect and hope for, and I think that they can be great together. So I'm not discrediting any of that. Am I able to get any information from the organization? I try to. That's kind of part of the process of being a reporter. But right now there's nothing, so we'll see. Yeah, inability to score late game has been huge. I think this is absolutely right. And then on the upset piece, the team did underperform. I'm not going to attribute it all to injuries. I talked a little bit about it today. But I do think that there might be a little bit of underestimation about just like how beat up this team is, how limited this team is. Jaylen is very obvious to me because I've been watching Jaylen play his whole career and he doesn't look like himself. That doesn't excuse all of the decision-making and the turnovers. Like some of that is just Jaylen. But you can tell he's not himself. And Porzingis is an absolute shell of himself. And again, maybe part of that is just him in the playoffs and he's not meeting the moment. I also think that he's dealing with something kind of scary, like the fact that he's been sick for months. Like on a human level, and I like this comment. They did this, Antonio says, I just want Jayson Tatum to be okay on a human level. That's how I view all these guys. Like, as a reporter, you develop a relationship with these players. You see them with their families, with their kids. And yes, they make a lot of money. And yes, they have a great life and fame and all of those things. But on a human level, they're just people, right? Porzingis is sick the same way that you and I get sick. And Tatum saw his life and his career flash before him the same way that anybody else would if their livelihood was kind of at stake and everything that they put. He wants to be, his aspirations for themselves that are incredible. So everything that was going through my mind yesterday was the human side. Like it was hard for me to even break down the game afterwards when we did our post-game show because it was so obvious how much bigger this was than that. So continuing to scroll here. Thank you for everybody for watching. I appreciate it. It's always great to have this community, especially in these moments. Mo here asks about whether Torrey Craig could be a good option. You're gonna see they're gonna go into the drawing board and mix things up. Whether it's Torrey, I think Torrey will probably play. I think we're gonna see maybe Baylor Shireman. Like they're gonna have to get a little desperate here, in part because they're down a guy who plays 40 minutes a night, but also if they want to win multiple games, which I don't think these are competitors, right? Like me being like resigned does not mean that they're resigned. They're going to be thinking about how do we win this series? And I do think it involves guys that haven't necessarily played yet. So does Torrey Craig play? Maybe. Yeah, he's a veteran player. He can be a good defender. I wouldn't be shocked if he sees some run. And I talked a little bit about this. I do think the offseason is going to be a major shakeup. I don't know. I still don't think Al's going to retire because Al is a competitor who's still playing high level of basketball, but maybe he's not. Maybe he doesn't have to stay in Boston anymore. I think Al was pretty adamant about staying in Boston beforehand. If they're going to tear things down or have a year where they're not really trying to compete, like maybe that's not the priority anymore for Al. So that's my biggest question. But again, I don't want to like jump the gun here because we don't actually know what Tatum's injury is yet. There's a tiny sliver of me that's like maybe this is not going to keep him out of ball next year, and maybe the organization is going to want to go in the direction of like this guy, let's be as competitive as possible. Like this is the Boston Celtics and we have a ton of talented players without him. And let's see what we can do. So it's all speculative at this point. Okay. Continuing to scroll here. Harmon here asks, how do you figure the new ownership figures into the offseason plan? Do you think that they're still waiting to go all in to win and pay the aprons fee to keep this team together moving forward? I think they already weren't going to pay kind of all the additional fees of being in the second apron, regardless of what was going to happen. In the back of my mind, I thought to myself, if they win the championship, then they're on the hot seat because are you really going to trade away a key piece of a dynasty of back-to-back champions? Assuming that's not going to happen anymore, it gives them a little bit of cover. It gives them even more cover now that Tatum's potentially out. So it changes the dynamics here. In my opinion, though, like I do think they're going to try to keep this team competitive, but it's going to be without key pieces, especially because say Tatum misses all of next year, he comes back, and by that point, Drew Holiday's 36, So guys like that still have a lot of value, but like are not as much long-term pieces. I could see being on the trading block more. I don't like talking about it when the series is still happening and Tatum's injury happened 12 hours ago. But if you're wondering, like that's kind of where I think some of the players that are on the older side that are not going to be able to kind of wait around and be effective by the time that Tatum gets back, those are the ones that I could see most likely being traded. Where somebody like Pritchard or Derek White, one of the younger players that will still kind of be in their prime in a year or two, like they are in a kind of better position. So yeah. I don't think this is the last year of the Jays era. I know a lot of people have been talking about trading Jaylen Brown. I know people have been really hard on Jaylen Brown through this. I don't think this is the last year you'll see these two guys play together. I don't think yesterday is the last game. I think this is the duo that ultimately achieved what most great duos don't, and that's they won a championship together. And I also think that Jaylen Brown is not going to be traded this offseason. And if he's not traded, then they come back and they play together. I could be wrong, right? Like somebody's going to be traded, so it's hard to know. And he's on a very expensive contract. I don't know what his value is right now around the league. I don't know if the Celtics believe that he can be the number one option on this team and what that team would look like. So there's a lot of outstanding questions. But right now my gut feeling tells me that we're going to see those two guys play together as Celtics again in the future. And I know a lot of people are calling for his trade right now, and I think it's a little bit of being a prisoner of the moment because he has had a tough series. I think he's limited and all of that. And he'll own up to it. He always doesn't shy from responsibility. I think you'll see if they lose game 5 and he doesn't play well again, I think you're going to see him kind of put it on his back the same way that he did in 23. I just wish people could keep like a level head around like, a guy having a bad game or a bad series or a bad playoffs or all these things, while keeping the bigger picture in mind of like what they have been able to achieve, right? Jalen's been a part of so many critical playoff runs, right? He's been their best player for several series. He was Finals MVP last year. So I know everybody processes things differently, but it's always a little bit kind of like peculiar to me that it feels like there's no leeway or there's no like understanding that it's not just about what happened this week. Like these guys are a culmination of an entire career, and I don't even want to really get into it, but like the animosity that Jaylen, I've seen get the hate and all that he's getting online because he turned the ball over on that play is really unfortunate. And I know everybody reacts to injuries and to things like that differently, but to me, it's like that's the last thing that anybody should be doing. Is kind of trying to send like vitriol to one of Tatum's teammates for something that he obviously did not intend to lose the ball, right? And that could have happened in many moments. I don't know if it's possible that Tatum had a strained Achilles and this was kind of on the, I don't know. So, yeah. Scrolling through here, thank you for all the comments. Thank you for everybody for watching. There's like several thousand people who are watching this across different platforms, which I always appreciate. Hopefully this can be somewhat therapeutic or at least just like being around each other in this community helps people. So continuing a lot of comments here. I'm just trying to scroll through here to make sure I don't miss any questions. I don't know when the official news would happen, but I would imagine that it's probably at some point in the next few hours. And again, there's still a chance that it's not what people are worried about, right? Evan here asks, Knicks fan here, who will the Celtics lead on to try and win the series? And more for Pritchard minutes is a good thing for Boston. Brown and Porzingis will seem compromised. I think Peyton Pritchard is going to have to, turn into the version of him that I thought that he's capable of long term. Like he's going to have to become a star in the series for them to have a chance here. He only played 20 minutes in game 4. I didn't really understand why. In game 3, he played 34 minutes. Obviously, he was the best player on the court in that game. So why he's been more limited, it's been a little confusing to me. I think he's held up defensively fine. I thought Derek struggled defensively yesterday game. Everybody kind of struggled defensively, but I don't think he's been a liability in the postseason at all. But they're going to need him. Brown is going to have to figure it out. He can't play the way that he has in these last few games if they're going to win. And Porzingis is going to have to become a regular season Porzingis. So everybody's going to have to step up. But those 3 guys in particular, I think Derek's already kind of been good. So Derek will kind of have to continue to do what he's been doing offensively. But those 3 guys are going to have to do more. And they're going to need somebody from the bench to contribute in a way they haven't. And I don't know if it's somebody that's totally new, a Baylor Shireman or something like that. Like, I don't know. Torrey Craig. But they're going to probably need like a contributor right now that we're not even on our forefront of our mind. So we'll see. Continuing to scroll here. Question from Tom. Do you think the rest of the NBA media will recognize what Tatum was brought to our team over the next season in his absence? I do think they will. I think sometimes there's always an expression of like, you don't appreciate somebody until they're gone. You don't appreciate something until it's gone. I think with Tatum, he is one of the most underappreciated stars. And I thought a lot about why that is because I don't really understand like the hate and all those things. But he's not a flashy player. He does all the little things really well. He's a really good defensive rebounder. Like who gets excited about defensive rebounding, right? He's a very good switch defender. Like who gets excited about that? Who gets excited about blocks and steals? So Tatum's game has kind of, it didn't capture the world the way that it could have because a lot of it is just like kind of like the blue collar work of basketball in a way. And it's not flashy and he plays kind of at his own speed and all those things. He's also somebody that's never had been involved in any controversy, that's only been praised by everybody. Everybody I've ever talked to in the organization talks just about his work ethic, about him as a person and all of that. He always treats us all with respect. You could ask him the toughest question. You could be like, Tatum, why did you suck today? And he would never lose professionalism and always. So I think there's things about him that people are going to appreciate. But to your point, Tom, like next year, if this team is mostly together and the main difference is that they got rid of Tatum, I think you're going to see or not got rid of Tatum, but the Tatum sideline with an injury. I think people will realize like how much of a role he played in making the system work. Like it will no longer just be about, he's a merchant of all the role players on his team. Like everybody always says, he's a role player or like he's just on a super team. Like I think people are going to appreciate the fact that it's a lot more than that now. And so we'll see. Will he be in game 5? I doubt we'll see him. Continuing to scroll here. I'm like 14 minutes behind you guys because I'm trying to, somebody called me after I answered the question. So now I'm trying to actually answer them. Thank you, Christopher, for the super chat. Hypothetically speaking, what do you think we could get in a Drew or KP trade? I don't think Porzingis has a ton of value right now. I think that his availability concerns, his postseason struggles, I think they kind of tanked his value, but he's also on a 1 year, he has 1 year left in his deal. And so that puts him in position where if like a team just wants to offload a little bit of money, he's a good contract because he's an expiring contract. Expiring contracts are easier to trade than contracts that have 4 or 5 years left. Drew's contract just kicked in this year, so he's going to be harder as far as somebody that wants to take money. I think a team that actually wants Drew will trade for Drew versus a team that just wants to offload some longer-term contracts might trade for Porzingis. So it's 2 kind of different scenarios. I think Drew's value is a lot higher. He's still playing at a high level. He's a more proven player. And I think he's was an integral part of 2 championships. And even though he's older, I think people around the league still believe in him. So who could you get? You could probably get a couple of draft picks. I think you could get some, a combination of role players, but I don't think the return is going to make anybody super excited. I think it's going to be more about offloading money. And I don't want to start naming names because I have to look at the books and kind of what contracts add up and where people are around the league. This is not the conversation I thought I'd be having in mid-May, honestly. And that was going to be my June homework, my July homework. But I do think that the return is not going to be super exciting to people. And I do appreciate the super chat. So thank you for that. Okay, continuing to scroll here. Okay, a lot of comments, a lot of people debating whether or not Jalen is at fault. A lot of Knicks fans that are very excited to win the series, which I understand. Um, we still don't know what the injury is for those of you that are coming in to ask. We still don't know exactly what's going on. Um, yeah, and this person says here the margin is Porzingis plays better, Celtics play with more ball movement. They definitely are going to need more ball movement. That the ball movement has been kind of tough here in recent days. And then one of the Knicks players unfortunately gets injured. Yeah, putting out no energy for injuries, anything like that. So hopefully that does not happen. But it probably would take something extreme, but not putting out that energy out there. Okay, continuing to look here. Okay, there are a lot of comments. I'm trying to find the questions. So I apologize if I'm taking a second here as I'm reading them. Okay. Yeah, and I think on the Knicks side, like there is definitely reality that this kind of happened to them last year where they had all these different injuries. Okay. So I don't think that I don't think the Celtics loss here should be put on injuries for what it's worth. Like I think the Celtics lost the series because they didn't execute down the stretch and they collapsed 3 out of 4 games. Is how much of it was a factor of the players not being at their best? It's uncertain because they haven't openly spoken about it. I think that it is a big factor, but I think that it's also a part of the postseason. So Jaylen Brown was asked about it after game 3, like, are you healthy? And he said, it's the playoffs, but he didn't say, I'm great or I'm injured or anything like that. I think this is just the reality of how things go. So Drew is definitely on the chopping block. I think everybody's kind of thinking about Drew Holiday right now, but he's also has just been incredible for this team. So maybe he's somebody that they do prioritize keeping around. A lot of it is going to be about who has value. Somebody here asked, do you think White is a trade candidate? One thing I've learned is that the guys that you are trade candidates, maybe if you're on the Celtics side, you're saying, Porzingis would be good to trade because he hasn't been effective in the playoffs. But at the same time, teams want players that have high value. So guys like Pritchard and White, who are in slightly more affordable deals and are younger and all that than Drew, are going to be the teams that are going to be the players that teams are calling Celtics about. So in that standpoint, like maybe there's some package of you giving up a guy who you don't want to trade. Like I don't think Celtics wanting to trade Derek White, but there's a lot of interest and value from around the league that they feel like is worth it. So quite literally anything can happen. I don't rule anything out. We watched Luka get traded. At that moment, I learned that I'm never going to say anything is not possible, anything is not going to happen, all of that. So anything can happen. I would imagine Derek White is at the bottom of the list of potential guys that could be traded. So we'll see. Thank you, everybody, for the nice messages. I don't take it personally. A lot of people were very mad yesterday that kind of how I was approaching the situation. I don't take it personally because I see the way people talk about the players themselves. So that's kind of how I stay out of taking that kind of stuff personally. But I do appreciate this. Question around leadership. I do feel like there was a little bit of a leadership vacuum in key moments in the series. I don't know exactly why, but in the fourth quarters of games 1, 2, and 4, when they kind of let the lead go, I think there was like, I asked Al Horford about it after game 2, and I said, were you guys thinking about game 1 when you guys were blowing the lead? Like, is that what was in the back of your mind? And he said, I was just thinking about all the leads that have been blown, not just game 1, like, all the leads that have been squandered. And he said, like, we couldn't handle it. We couldn't handle being in that position. And so to me, like, that was like the most kind of astounding line is that Al Horford admitted straight up that they couldn't handle being in that moment. I was like, why not though? Like, you guys are champions. You guys are veterans. Like, I think is a lot of leadership on this team. But I wonder if that's the quiet version of that leadership, or the like that egalitarian nature of the leadership, of some of it just like led to in this moment for things to be a little bit more challenging. I'm going to scroll through a bunch of these because I'm like 16 minutes behind the chat bar, and I want to make sure that I'm seeing the comments that are coming in real time. I'm going to rapid fire. I don't think this is Jaylen Brown's last year in Boston. I think he's going to come back. And okay. Why is injury up to not come out? Because the Celtics are really good and kind of keeping a very tight reporting in house, all that. Phil here says that He's a PT, and that there's a small possibility that this is a Lisfranc frank fracture of the midfoot. It does look like the classic Achilles rupture. I think everybody feels like the Achilles rupture is the most likely thing. If I actually don't know much about a Lisfranc frank fracture. I assume anything is better than the Achilles tear, but we'll see. Continuing to scroll here. Yeah, there's a lot of ambiguity here, right? Ton of credit to the Knicks for sure. Okay, I'm just gonna skip through a bunch of these comments because I'm way behind you guys. I'm glad that this is therapeutic. That is the goal. When I was trying to decide if I should jump on here, I was like, should I write first? Should I do this? I have a post-game story on Celtics blog that is about kind of the scene. Let me actually put it in the chat here because I do want, if anybody wants to read it and kind of read more about the moment. I know there's a lot going on here, but I'm putting this is the link in the chat of just this, my observations from being on the ground. Oops. Sorry, I froze up here. Super chat. Thank you to Shervan, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. The Jays carry us with the highs and the lows. Being a fan gets hard. The highs so very high and the lows are very low. We will keep fighting. I think that's the beauty of sports. That's the beauty of life, right? If everything was easy, it wouldn't be so beautiful. And I think at the same time, it highlights just how special the 2024 championship was, because you see in 2025, everything that can go wrong kind of went wrong, right? Between the execution to the health and all of that. So, the anger part is the one that I don't relate with. I know a lot of people feel angry in these moments. I just feel kind of like empathy for the players, for the fans, for the people who this means so much to, right? For the people who, dedicate our lives to this community and to the sport and everything like that. But I do think this is kind of the right outlook to have, that this is just kind of the life cycle of sports and the life cycle of wins and losses and all of these things. Continuing to scroll here. Okay, I'm just going to go all the way to the bottom. And then if there's questions anybody wants answered, I can. Okay, the Lisfranc thing is what Chet Holmgren had. Okay, I knew I remember that. Okay, that's what it was from. So I think one of the things that I want to just stress here, and I am going to wrap up here in a few minutes because I'm actually battling a little bit of a cold, so I'm like losing my voice. And usually we have an ad break, but I'm actually not doing an ad break today, so I'm going to have a chance to even take a break. But I do want to say we're going to do a lot more debriefs over the next few weeks. We're going to have pregame coverage on Wednesday, and we're going to have postgame coverage on Wednesday. We're going to have, all the analysis discussions about this offseason, all the things that could come forward, all the potential things that could go wrong, potential things that could go right, offseason trades. We're going to discuss everything. At the same time, there's a game tomorrow to be played, and as much as things feel terrible right now and over, and it feels like it's already the offseason, it's not. And the Celtics players don't feel that way. They're going to get ready to prepare for tomorrow. So there's a game. We're going to have everything on CLNS Media. I'm going to continue doing podcasts throughout this offseason. Subscribe to my podcast, You Got Boston podcast, on YouTube, Apple, Spotify. Like this video if you're watching this on YouTube, watching this on my channel or on the CLNS Media channel. There's 2 streams right now that are concurrent. If you're wondering where some of these comments are coming from, they're coming from the YouTube. So like, comment, subscribe, share. Thank you all so much, as always, for watching, for engaging. Even the Knicks fans, those of you that have been respectful, I really appreciate. It's, I think it's fun. It's been fun to kind of have the Knicks fans be in the mix here throughout the series. And yeah, I wish I had, sometimes I feel like I know exactly what to say and exactly kind of what we should be talking about in these shows. But right now I honestly didn't. I just figured I'd jump on here and we could all just chat. And I missed a lot of your questions. Let me just make sure I didn't miss any super chats here. Christopher, thank you. Christopher just says, we appreciate you, Noah. So I really appreciate this. The super chats are very nice. I've never had super chats on my podcast before. So thank you all so much. I'm seeing people in the chat say that Sham says the Celtics are preparing for the worst. I think we kind of knew that, but we'll see. Yeah, we'll have more stuff. I'll probably go live again tomorrow. I'll probably go live many times throughout the summer. We'll have summer league coverage, draft coverage, but maybe this is going to be a series, right? So we'll see where things got to go from here. But as always, I really appreciate you guys for the most part. This, it's been awesome to kind of get to know the fan base. I recognize so many of the names in the chat. This is one of those human moments, right? This is one of those moments where it's like you realize just how fragile the game is, how fragile the human body is. And being in the arena, seeing the reactions and all that, it was really emotional. It was hard to do a post-game show after. It was hard to interview players after. A little bit easier the next day, but still not, still challenging. And I've never seen an injury like that in person. I've never seen a player get carried off. So for me, it was like, I've played basketball my whole life. I've seen different things, but that was like an Achilles injury I've never seen. So, yeah, appreciate you all. I think everything, just to keep things in perspective here, I'll just say, these are the darker moments in playoffs. Like these are the darker moments in franchises, but franchises respond. And you saw how dark things felt for the Warriors in 2019. In 2022, they win a championship, right? And Klay Thompson missed 2 years, right? And he comes back and is a part of that run. So things happen. We'll see. We'll see where things go from here. As we have more information, we'll be able to do more analysis. Maybe we'll even do more stuff later today, but figured I'd jump on here while we have no information and just chat with all of you. So yeah, I'll end it there. Thank you all so much, and enjoy the rest of your days as much as you can. Enjoy watching other NBA basketball, and we'll see you all tomorrow for Game 5.